Good morning. Good morning. How you doing today? Fashionably late? What is it? 2 minutes? Oh, I am late, huh? I'm late a minute or two. Oh man. My bad. My bad. How we doing? Naveen, Lav, Smokey. Good. How are you this Saturday? What's going on? What is going on today? Good to see you, Sammy. Yes, you all. Yes. Um, hello. I hope everybody is doing well today. A little weekend live stream just to wanted to hang out and chat about a few things on the agenda for today. Cheeto hates Arsenal. Yeah, that was nice to see. His comment, his reply on what was it, Camison's post about the win. Trying to ignore the kids, and this is your only reprieve. Fair. I understand. My son is at a sleepover, so a little bit of a reprieve there. Birthday's tomorrow. Very nice. Okay. Hopefully United can win. Hello from Durban. Yes. What a win by United. How many of you watched the Youth Cup game yesterday? It was great. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to watch. Um, yeah. How many of you watched it? Let me know if you did. I definitely enjoyed that. Watched it, entire game. Nice, yes. Good. Great game. Yep. It was on YouTube. Yep. Who do you think was your favorite then? Because we'll talk about it. I want a few things on the agenda today. I want to talk about youth. Talk about Vivell, the recruitment, some info on potential names or potential people we're looking at. Talk about Garnacho and Amorim a little bit, because I want people's thoughts on that. Maybe I was too harsh, or maybe not. Um, who is your I guess I'm gonna let's do a little bit of a like a poll here. Who kind of impressed you the most? I'm not sure if I'm gonna get enough names in here to do this. Kamasan definitely deserves a shout. Please. Um, Fletcher, maybe. See if I'm just gonna put these up. Thwaites or Fletcher might be the biggest answer on here. For me, because I can't get 5 answers. For me, it was in watching it. It was definitely Kamasan, far and away. 120 minutes. 120 minutes. Kamasan is playing, bombing up and down a pitch. Gets an Arsenal red card. Gets the goal to bring United back within the 90. Jack Fletcher would be the Fletcher that we're talking about here. But for me, it's Kamasan. I thought he was like single-handedly the best player by some, like, given the whole body of work of the game, Kamasan has to stand out for me heavily on that. I was very impressed with him. I was really impressed with him. His work rate, his energy, his physicality. Extra time, he's still getting all the way up the pitch as a fullback. Crosses, dribbling, shooting. What does he not have? You know. Yeah. I mean, Max Dowman was the best player on the pitch for both teams, no doubt about that. He's single-handedly just ran through United kind of on too many occasions, unfortunately. But for United. But yeah, I mean, I was a bit surprised by that with Kamasan. He's kind of, I'm not saying he's come out of nowhere, but he's definitely come up a lot in the recent times. And if you were to ask me today which player would be most ready in that from that squad, which player would be most ready to be in the first team, I would say Kamasan. I would definitely say that. I think that it's an interesting time with the youth at United. And by the way, let me put on my little YouTuber job here. Thank you all for being here. Please make sure to subscribe, turn your notifications on. There's a couple hundred people here. Make sure you get the likes up, 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 up. We should at least have 100 of them, okay? Should at least, okay? Thank you. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting time with the youth squad. Um, yeah, watching his games fully shows the youth. Yeah, see who has a full game and not, and that is totally true because I think there's a lot of players that get a lot of definitely get a lot of hype. But watching the full game, it's really interesting to be clear. Who is the most impressive, in there. And that's what surprised me the most about Kamasan because I haven't been able to catch, it's hard to catch a lot of full games, obviously, from I mean in general for the youth, but also in the US as well, especially. And he like start to finish looked like a footballer who was physically there. And I think that matters a lot when you're talking about a player's ability. He reminded me a bit, and I think people will play this, maybe take this as a negative, but I don't think it is at all. But he reminds me a bit of Malagusto, um, because he has really really good pace, very very strong driving runs with the ball, physical, has good height on him for a fullback as well, and and I think that's I think I really rate Malagusto to be fair. So I saw similarities there. Fullbacks there's a lot of like smaller ones, there's a lot of techie ones, there's a lot of defensive ones, but in terms of like a bombing down fast tall fullback, he reminds me of Malagusto. And I would absolutely take a player like that at our right back position, right now. And good technical control too. Like he's not out of, and that's the thing. Malagusto is a very good player, yeah. And that's kind of the comparison that I would give in terms of style, because he has the size, he has the pace, but he controls the ball well too. He's good with it. Sometimes the final ball I thought was a little lacking, on some of the crosses, but his ability to find the space to beat a man off the dribble, all of that, was fantastic. So I like that. Um, I liked that. I think that was good. Yeah, Kamasan wins this poll, and I think that it's an interesting time because when we look at United's youth squad, when you look through like the under 21s, for example, there's not a lot there right now in terms of players who you think, yeah, these are guys who are going to get in. And that's kind of normal because, one of the things that, so I wanted to talk about youth because obviously I was speaking about, I made a video yesterday. I made the video yesterday about, the kind of the overhaul, the recruitment, things like that. And obviously a big part of that as well is youth, is the youth levels. And some time back, I shared some stuff about, the different view of the academy, about it being a faster, more, quicker decisions, not having players sit in the youth levels for too long. And and when there's a reason why like at the under 21s, is kind of chaotic and is never tends to be like as good a measurement of things. And in part it's because, at the under 21s level, for example, by that age, players really should be kind of playing or moving on. You know what I mean? That's what I see when it comes to youth football, and that's kind of the view. It's like there's not a lot of players in there. Once you're hitting 18, 19 years old, you have to be playing at a first team level somewhere. And that's kind of been the view of a lot of people. The best under 21 teams are the teams where the players are not great. And so the good teams, the best players are going off playing somewhere, going on loan, getting in the first team, all of that. So United have not too much in the under 21s level, honestly. I mean, probably it's Kone, who's been just recently signed, of course, in there, but beyond that, there's not going to be much. But what United need to definitely be faster about and doing more about is to quickly move these players forward and on. And obviously, you can't empty the team and all of that. But in looking at that to the under 18s level, when you look at all the players coming through, a lot of the best players, the best kind of talents are probably a lot of the players they bought off the bench, a lot of the even younger players like Lucel, Mantato, Thwaites, Ibrigimov. These are your younger players who weren't starting necessarily even in that under 18s cup and that came off the bench and are probably the best talents in the team. Shea Lacey, who wasn't there. With the 18s who are there, I look at players and I think that one of the things they'll want to do is get them going a little quicker, into some level of first team football. I look at someone like Jack Fletcher and I think he probably needs to play senior football soon. And I'm not saying at United, but this is where United want to be better about this in terms of really developing their talents. Is Jack Fletcher going to get better at the under 21s level? I don't know. Like physically, of course, there's that aspect of it. But really, you're going to want players like that starting to get senior minutes somewhere, on loan, at a lower league, things like that. But you're going to want to be seeing that. And that's, because otherwise it's you don't want them sitting, all the way 8 to 18, 19, and then they go into 21s and they're like 20, 21, and then they maybe make it in the first team from time and time again. They got to be playing at 18 to really develop the next level of skills to make it and all of that. And so I'd like to see that. So it's just interesting because I think that there's a few players at that under 21 level that probably need to move up soon. I look at Jaden Camason, right? So he's just 18 in December, but you can see that's a player that is probably going to need to take a step up soon. But why not? Why not? And that's where we'll hope at the youth level that there's the right steps, but that by next season, going into turning 19 years old, some of these guys are going to be that they start to get first team minutes somewhere. And I think it's important. I mean, it's just my opinion on that, but Jack Fletcher will be turning 18 here soon as well. So in next season, you've got these guys, some of the better performers who are going to be turning 19 years old, in that first team. Fletcher and I would say Fletcher and Camason of the starting lineup from last night are probably the guys, that are the most impressive. They'll have to move up to under 21s next season anyway as well. I think, right? Or maybe I guess they could stay another season. I don't really know how it works. Camason has played with the under 21s, yeah. And so I think that they're definitely looking for a step up. But what I want to see with those players is that they get in the first team environment or they go on loan. And it would be good to see, for example, let's say Jack Fletcher and Camason come on the summer tour with the first team, like we tend to do. Bring some of the the best young talents forward. Probably we see Kone and Cheeto and maybe a couple of those guys. Then I think come summer, they play with the first team, they train with the first team, but then they've got to be in the first team or they need to go on loan once you're making that. Because they look at someone like Harry Amas, right? And he moved up into the first team environment in the summer, and then it's kind of stalled out now. What is he going to gain at the under 18s level? I don't think really anything. I think his skill set is pretty there. I mean, maybe it's just hoping he grows or something, but I don't think he's going to gain anything if he doesn't go off and he's got flaws in his game, but I don't think he's going to work through those or grow and establish his game more, because, unless he goes and plays first team football somewhere. And that's what I'd like to see, the United just do better at in moving forward and a lot quicker. And that's kind of the idea, is when you've got these great talents like Harry Amas, I really use him as an example, of this, because I look at him, I'm like, okay, well, he probably had value after summer, where you could even sell him into a buyback to a lower league club, a few million with a little buyback. He gets if you didn't want to loan him, and it's like, get the talent out there playing. Now people are looking at it like, what happened? Why is he back on the under 18s? His growth is kind of stagnated. It's stalled, and you're like, okay, it goes from like one of the most exciting talents, and you're like, what have you. I think the under 21s is a testing ground of, can you handle the physicality? And once you do that, then you move quick. Then you got to move quick. Once you can handle the physicality of under 21s, you got to go play somewhere within 6 months. I think the next window you got to move, and hopefully that's what United will do. But because I look at all these wonderful talents like that, I look at the Amas, and I look at Jack Fletcher and Camason, and a lot of these players, there's younger ones like who are still 16. They can play a little bit longer, another season and such, right? But I look at those ones and I'm like, okay, does it work for them to spend a whole year or two at the under 21s after this when they're 18? Or would we be better off sending them on loan? Because I think we would. And most of the best developing clubs, I think the 21s are filled with 18s, and then they go off on loan, they sail, or they get in the first team pretty quick after that. And that's what we'd like to see. I'd like to see the ages get younger. I mean, you could see it with Arsenal. Arsenal have developed a ton of talents. They're under 18s like 15 and 16-year-olds. And their under 21s is 18-year-olds. So they're moving people fast through the ranks and moving, it's like, it's got to be a good machine there. So that's where I'd like to see United definitely improve a little bit. And hopefully we do this summer. But it's exciting. It's exciting because there is a lot of really, really, really good talent in there. There's a lot of really good talent, and maybe a couple who are fringe. Like, could they help United? Maybe. But there's a lot that we'll have to watch over the course of this year and next year, and that then we'll be having the same discussions next summer. But that's one of the things I want to see this summer, is those 18-year-olds who are turning 19, not just stagnate in the under 21s for a whole year. I don't want to see that, because I feel like we've never gotten anything out of that. Maybe I'm wrong, but like, can anybody tell me, just before I move on from this, have we really had any major promotions who spent a long time in the under 21s? I don't think, I guess it was under 23s before, but not like, unless they were like 16, 17, right? Because, I look at like Garnacho came up pretty much directly from, the 18s, right? They won that cup. He moved up. Cobby has came in at 17. Obviously even other ones that weren't that, Greenwood, etc., kind of came up. Jesse, okay, yeah, true. But I think a lot of our best talents kind of moved up a bit sooner. McTominay spent a little bit, didn't he, in the youth ranks? But I think he was just because he was growing so much. He was a late bloomer. Jesse's probably kind of the closest 10 years ago, right? But it's not been a lot. It's not been a lot of them. Like, how many guys they end up in under 21s and then they just stagnate and disappear? It's most, right? Most of the players who end up in our under 21s kind of just fade, most of them just kind of fade away. They either kind of make it at 18, 19, or they don't, you know what I mean? And they go out on loan or they come into the first team. And I think that's the correct view of it. And, I think we've stalled guys, who were ready they spent too long in the youth ranks. To think about guys like Angel Gomez and Jimmy Garner. They spent too long kind of sitting there, not progressing. Chong, maybe Iqbal. I'm not saying they're amazing talents, but I think that they were all they all stayed like a year too long in the youth level, beyond when they should have moved. And who knows, maybe it would be a little bit different if they hadn't for them. So that's one thing I hope we'll see, but definitely a big focus has been on, with all of this moving forward is, hey, we need to get more from the academy coming through. We need to push that pipeline quicker. So yeah, there's that. So then, obviously on Vivell, again, I did this video yesterday kind of talking about everything that he was bringing to the table. But certainly, his prerogative is more than just, we're sacking 20 scouts and we're going to use Vivell's network to find the players that we want. Vivell's kind of whole strategy here is definitely also about reworking the way that that we recruit in general. Did Cunha get another red card, by the way? Oof. And they're knocked out of the cup. Oh. Okay. He had a fight again. I don't know. Sorry, just noticed that. Cunha's punched someone and been sent off, huh? I mean, you'd probably just have to avoid at this point. These are bad signs, man. Like, you gotta. I would avoid anybody like that at this point in time. You know what I mean? I would just avoid anybody like that. That's two really bad reds this season. Those are big red flags. I mean, you can't spend 60, 70 million on a player who can't control his emotions like that and is going to get a second ban for slapping or punching someone. Like, are you kidding me? You just can't. You just can't. That, for me, that strikes him off of the list of a player that's assigned. Another incident like this that quickly, just for me, you take it off. I mean, this isn't like Cantona kicking a racist in the crowd. This is like the guy's just an idiot. Like, that you just avoid. Sorry, as just an aside. Well, all for the best, I suppose. Because he doesn't necessarily fit what we're looking for in terms of the expenses and things like that. Anyway, but yeah. Anyway, I mean, there's a lot of red flags. I mean, he doesn't have enough of a good track record to be. He doesn't have enough of a track record, I think, Cunha, to do this. I really don't think he does to be like this. That's no good. You don't have if you don't have a track record to allow this. 2 minutes before penalties too. Yeah, I mean, that's just crazy, man. That's just crazy. The last thing you need is to sign someone like that and then they just fuck you over regularly after you spent a bunch of money on them. And we've had enough crackheads doing dumb stuff. I don't mean that literally. I just mean, people who lose their shit and have bad attitudes. Like, we'll talk about another one. Just kidding. Yeah. Yeah, it's great if you can score, but if you can't get on the pitch all the time, and if you get banned 6, 7, 8 matches, I mean, I remember in the first season when Casemiro arrived, in the second half of the season, when he kept getting himself sent off and he was being way too rash with his challenges, that I said, look, this is kind of turning into a disaster. And I was raising a lot of red flags, and it wasn't popular at the time because everybody was on the Casemiro hype train still. But I remember people were pretty unhappy with me for calling it out at that time. But I said, look, Casemiro's kind of been shit. And you got to be careful when a player starts doing this, because to me, it's a major red flag when players start losing their head a little bit, when they start doing stupid things, when they start getting reckless and out of control. Casemiro's never played well since then. It's just, you got to be careful with guys who do this kind of stuff. Anyway, Vivell's job is to overhaul, the way that we're scouting as well. So, like, if you think about one of the problems that we've had with scouting in general, is like we can have all these scouts, right? And there's a lot of data, video, things like that go into scouting nowadays, and analysis too, right? But let's take like the example of like Wan-Bissaka. And it's like, oh, we watched 645 right backs before signing Wan-Bissaka. Okay, now obviously a bit of that is just PR, a bit of that's just nonsense, but it's a bit about it's a bit about like, why would, the bigger is not always better when it comes to these types of things. Bigger is not always better. And United would had this huge scouting network to just look for tons of shit, tons of players. But what does that do at the end of the day, right? What is that without focus? You know what I mean? It's like, do you, if you're dropping a bomb, I shouldn't talk about that at this point in time. It's too close to home all the on the world stage at the moment to talk about that. But let's just call it like you'd want to have laser focused targeting rather than like cutting off the leg, right? For something that was wrong. You'd want to get in there and like be able to find the exact thing with more surgical precision. But you don't need that, right? You don't need to look at every player. And the thing with United is that because we've never had, this is where it stems from. We've never had a philosophy as a club, right? We've never had a club-driven style of recruitment. So, yeah, I'll avoid World War III. We've never had a club-driven style of recruitment. So you say we want a right back. How has it been? What right back? What kind of right back? What traits should they have? What qualities should they have? I don't know. Because this manager might want this and this manager might want this, and we're getting a new manager next season. What qualities should they have in a right back? When we signed Wan-Bissaka, what did we want? Don't know. Can anybody sit there and say, these are the traits we wanted in a right back? Like that they are able to do these things and this is what they're good at. No, you couldn't. And it's been that way with every signing. We just needed to be abreast of all the players in the world. And then it's like, if there's a good player, big name, United are involved because we know everybody. Of course, then what's the point of scouting all these people, right? It was just whoever's currently trendy. So what was the point? We went after good left back, good right back, right? And the thing is that is how it was. I mean, I had access to some good information during the time Ollie was here. And to be fair to Ollie, okay, his eye for a footballer was really good. He wanted a lot of really good players. Now, Wan-Bissaka was a suggestion from Jose Mourinho, which is kind of funny, but it does make sense for Jose to have a fullback like Wan-Bissaka, right? He really wanted a defensive fullback. Ollie had good ideas. There was a lot of players he wanted who were really talented, mind you. I mean, Jude Bellingham and Haaland and Declan Rice, and like these are good players, and he really liked those players he could tell were going to be really good. He had a really good eye for young players who were going to be really, really good footballers. And fair enough to him on that. But there was still no stylistic, mushing of this is the type of player we want. So then you need scouts because you got to look at everybody on earth to figure out who the hell you're going to get. And so that's different. If United are looking and now saying, okay, what do we need next year? We need we need a right back. Okay, we need a right back. Well, what right back? Well, now you're going to know stylistically. What do we want out of a right wing back? What do we want out of that? Okay, we need somebody pacey. We want somebody who's good carrying the ball. We want somebody who's very good at inverting through the midfield and then breaking lines with his passes. I'm not saying this is how you decide players, but I'm saying let's say you wanted those traits. Well, now there's a lot of data where you can look and say who's doing that. Who's a player that's carrying the ball? Who's a player that's doing this? What is their dual success rate? All of this kind of stuff. And there's so much data you can look at and say, okay, we've narrowed it all down. There's these players that are doing this. We go scout those 10 players and pick the ones we want. You look at someone like Patrick Dorgu. What did we want? We wanted a left-footed player who's very strong, driving the ball forward, fast, physical levels, good in the duel, carries the ball extremely well, and is under a certain age. So they go through them and say, okay, well, there's Milos Kerkez is one that they really liked based on that. And there's Patrick Dorgu. Okay, and then there was Nuno Mendes, who probably fits it too, but is a former Amorim player. And in the past, we would have just held it together, just said, we're just going to, we would, why do we need to, we narrowed it down. They actually make sense. Kerkez and Dorgu actually make a lot of sense in terms of certain traits that they have that kind of match up. as does Nuno Mendes, even though they have different levels of skills and things like that. And Diego Leon, he actually is a pretty similar player to Patrick Dorgu in a lot of these ways from physical traits and things like that. There's an alignment there, and then you can look and say, okay, well, what do we think? Do we have to go for the big name, or can we go for Patrick Dorgu, someone we could get for 24 million, for 50,000 a week wages or 40,000 a week wages, and go, you know? And that's what we did. And I think it's going to work out way, way better. But it's not just that. It's the fact that, we could buy 3 Dorgus for the price of Nuno Mendes, right? So when you look at building a team out, you got to fill it that way. You got to fill it that way. You look at our attack right now. Do we need a really good striker? Of course we do. I think we totally do. But at the same time, would we be a better team today if we had 3 good young players like, I'm just giving examples like Chris Rigg or Güler from Turkey, who's at Madrid right now. We'll talk about in a second. Or and Dorgelis to mix into the front 3 and to play and to develop. Yes, we would be better. We'd have more options, but we'd also have an upward pattern of growth. And they didn't all have to work. If we signed them, they don't all have to work out. They don't all have to become amazing, because you can turn around and move them on very easily. You go sign Mendes for 60 million and 200,000 a week, and then you want to move him on in a year, you're screwed. It's the same reason we can't move on. It's going to be tough to move on Højlund. Same reason we can't move on Mount. Same reason we can't move on Shaw. Same reason we can't move on these players is because essentially, of course, the expense. So it's not just that. It's not just a strategy of like, well, you just buy young players and things like that, and then that's it, and that works, and then you're set for life if you buy young players and it's always going to work, and you can go without buying any top players. It's more the point of, especially when we're rounding out the squad, maybe we could do a lot better. Maybe we could do better by doing that more often, and not necessarily only buying the expensive players that are out there. And I used an example which I know that some people aren't gonna love, of like Brighton, but some people will, to be fair, will like it. Of like Brighton, where they built a lot of really good players, and I know a lot of people look and say, well, you can't do a Brighton to be successful, and I agree in that respect. But what was a curious kind of thought experiment was, I was looking the other day at like, if you took the players that Brighton sold in the last few years, and you said, what if they didn't have to sell them? Now, bear in mind, Brighton have a small budget, okay? So they built this with a small budget, this team of players. Now, Colwill, they would have probably gotten if they weren't Brighton, but like, this is a team they built with a pretty small budget, a Brighton budget. Now, they had to sell them because that's the Brighton business model. But what if you didn't have to sell them? Okay? This is a good team. Okay? I know. That's the hook. I got to keep you guys watching through the rest of my nonsensical yapping. This is a good team. This is a good team right here, actually. Is it a great team? No. Is it a league-winning team? No. But this would have been a good team if you put this all together, of the best players that Brighton have got and sold over the last 4 or 5 years. That's actually a very, very damn good team. Look at that midfield. McAllister, Caicedo, and Balaba. That has an argument for the best midfield in the Premier League right now. Yeah, and it could be Duncan in place of Colwill. I was talking about Colwill and saying, you could, if it wasn't Brighton, they could have kept him even though he was on loan. Like, they could have signed him permanently. But imagine you didn't have to sell these players, and you have the financial wherewithal to spend, to buy another like very good player on top of these young talents that you've brought in, on top of these young players that you signed, right? And that's closer to Liverpool. Right, that's closer to Liverpool. It's closer to what Arsenal did as well, where you get a lot of good young players, but you're also getting Arsenal, not recently, mind you, but you're getting some good ones on top of that. So, it's an interesting way to look at it when you look at that it's just intriguing, right? If you're buying, Dorgus and Riggs and Hackneys and these types of players, but you're also able to, get an Osimhen here or there. You know what I mean? On top of that, in key positions especially. But you can develop these, and they're not all going to be hits, but you can move them on if they're not. And I just thought it was an interesting kind of thought about it, especially in a rebuilding phase. You could probably build a team that route that gets back towards the Champions League spots, especially if you can buy a couple good players on top of that because you have more money. And that will allow you to do that. But it kind of shows you can get really good players without spending a ton of money if the recruitment is right as well. And build up, which we all know. So there's a sensibility to this, and this is kind of the overall view of recruitment in general. Is like, the primary goals are reduce the age, reduce the wage, stop buying 3 players for 60 millions, where every year we're scrambling because it's like one player gets injured and you're in trouble. You constantly, you look at our squad, it's always thin. It's always thin. And the players that we have as backups are old, right? You say, oh, well, if someone gets injured, who has to step up? It's Casemiro, it's Eriksen, it's Evans, it's Lindelof, and no matter what their quality is, there's a problem with that. You're always in a decline. You're always trying to arrest the decline. Like if you look at United, right, in terms of every summer, what are we doing? Are we adding on to a growth? Like, are we Plymouth are up? Oh, damn, that's awesome. Like, if you look at our trajectory every summer, what are we doing? Are we having a growing team that we're adding to? Or are we somewhere like not high enough and we're constantly trying to arrest the decline, replace the players who are now falling off? But we're not winning titles. If you're winning titles, you can constantly be trying to replace the players who are starting to decline. But we're not even winning titles. We're floating between 4th and 8th every season, most seasons. And we're like constantly trying to, now we got to replace Casemiro. Now we got to replace Eriksen. Now we got to replace Shaw. Now we got to replace these players who are all falling off. And so we never progress, right? So we buy really good players, but they're just replacing players we've already had. And there's no growth pattern. There's no growth underneath it to happen, right? It's kind of hard to describe, but it's like we're constantly, like we have a building that's sinking in the sand, and we keep piling up stuff under it. We keep piling stuff under it to keep it where it is, but we never get to go up because the sand's always sinking. So what if we built where the sand isn't sinking and it's actually like growing somehow magically? The earth is coming up and pushing naturally. The building is getting taller year by year rather than sinking. And so when we do buy players, we're adding it on top of a growth pattern. And that's the idea. How do we get a solid growth pattern at the core of United? And then you're actually adding every season. And I kind of look at this year and think that's what we've experienced. We've experienced kind of the burst of the bubble. Actually, a bubble. United being a bubble team is actually a really, really good allegory or whatever you'd have you for this. Like United's performances under Ollie, under Ten Hag, a lot of that have been a bit of a bubble, right? You're getting by on some older, high wage, overperforming players and being carried by some monstrous individuals. And the bubble has popped this year. We look at it, we don't have anybody left doing that. That's where we've really come down to. We've they're done. They're injured. They're old. The bubble's popped. We're not getting a Casemiro to save the season who lasts 1 year. We didn't get anybody to come save the season. We don't have anyone like that. We didn't get a Cavani who comes in and saves one season, or a Ronaldo, not that it saved the season, but maybe for half of it, who gets 17, 19 goals even at an old age. We didn't do that. So the bubble's popped. And now we've got to move all of that on and actually work on the foundations. Because every year it was like, who's our bubble signing? And if you, it's actually interesting to think about. It's really interesting to think about that. Like, I'm thinking about what we did, and like under Ollie, right? We didn't really have a good team, but then we got Bruno, and Bruno like pushed the bubble up. Um, and then we got Cavani in the next summer before Ollie's second season, and it was COVID, and we kind of like got by on that, and we thought we're gonna be really good. And then the next year, even though we signed Varane and Sancho and Ronaldo, it all fell apart because it was a bubble. It wasn't real. It was inflated. It wasn't solid. And then you take Ten Hag. Well, Casemiro was the bubble. I'm sorry, it just happens to me. But no, but then you get Casemiro, and it's like there's the next bubble, the Casemiro bubble, and then the Casemiro bubble, and it's over, and we're shit. And last summer we didn't, not this last summer, but the summer before Ten Hag's second season, we didn't do a bubble signing. Who did we sign? We signed Mount, who was injured the whole time, Højlund, who isn't ready, and Onana, who cost us the Champions League group that year. There was no bubble signing. There was no big player bails us out of being shit because they're such a great talent. It didn't exist. Nobody did, right? And so this year it's the same. We haven't signed any like game-changing bubble player, and most of the guys who were our bubble players, Rashford carrying us in season 1 of Ten Hag, Casemiro, Eriksen, they're all in decline. We signed solid players, in my opinion, solid young players in Ugarte and Yoro and Xerxes, but none of them are like these game changers. You know what I mean? That are like going to just solve everything and carry you through a game. So we stopped doing that. We stopped doing that. And that's why we're experiencing this. We don't have the Zlatan, the Cavani, the Casemiro, the Varane to bail us out anymore. We just don't have them. Isn't it a bit concerning that we're kind of following the Chelsea route, signing mainly young players when you experienced players? No, because I actually think Chelsea's project is really good. The problem that Chelsea have had, the real problem with Chelsea's project is not the signing of young players. It's one that they keep changing managers on the young players because they were actually progressing pretty well on Pochettino. I don't know why they switched. They took a really big risk with whoever it is now, and they actually were performing from December halfway through Poch's season to the end. For the first half of this season was the same, and now they're declining. So they've actually arrested whatever progress they were making and gotten worse. I don't know why they did that, but the other factor is chaos in how they were recruiting. They were constantly cycling through. Now we did that last summer, Ashworth in, Ashworth out. And you can see the mistake that makes. Maresca, yeah. You can see the mistake that makes by not having it defined. But it's been chaos there. I mean, Vivell was there for like 9 months and then left. And it was like constantly changing. And then they went and blew 100 million on guys like the young winger that's compared to Anthony, who's banned at the moment, But like they took huge risks in doing that and spent massive amounts of monies on some of those players as well. They've made a lot of good signings and they have a lot of good young players. I mean, you can see plenty have worked out. Nicholas Jackson and Palmer and a lot of decent signings there. But Mudryk, yeah, they spent enormous money on bad young players. You can't go spend 100 million when you go down this route. You don't buy players for 100 million on this route. I think Enzo, Fernandez, and such are good players, but they spent too much money on them. Way, 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 way too much money on them. But otherwise, their strategy wasn't terrible. I mean, it got them back up into competing in top 4 and all of that. But they've just made more stupid decisions, and obviously we could too. We have to avoid that. But in theory, it was a decent idea to buy a lot of young players. So. So this is where we're headed. On the route that we're going is, to build up the base rather than keep trying to replace, build at the top. right? And that's probably the example. If you've got a building and it's sinking down, we kept trying to add to the top, and it's sinking, and it's like it's going, and it keeps going down. We stopped adding to the top, it's still sinking. That's why we're so low. Now we have to add to the foundations to have it be a building that is growing rather than going down. But that being said, you still have to get that right. And I don't think you can do it 100%, right? So you take a discussion like striker, right? I look at the strikers and look, I'm not an expert. If Vivell, Wilcox, and such think Liam Delap is the right guy, fine. I think it could be a huge error. I think it could be a huge error because, I don't think we'll get worse. Let me put it this way, okay? And I think that's the interesting part of the strategy, right? If we go young and we sign like a good young center back, Kenda, someone like Hayden Hackney in the midfield, a young midfielder, we sign a Chris Rigg and a Dorgelis up front. Are we going to be worse than the season? No. We're going to be a lot better because at the end of the day, call it for what it is. We go back to this thing here. None of these guys are contributing. So, we can dump these players and replace them with young guys like Hackney, young guys like Kenda, young guys like, looking at the names over here, right? You can replace them with these types of young player names. And would you be better? Yeah, you would. You totally would. We're not going to get worse because these guys are doing nothing for us. None of these guys are contributing to the team at all right now, right? So we will get better no matter what by doing this, by replacing all these older, uncontributing players for young players. We will get better, okay? It is going to improve. However, at the same time, it's a risk. You go for Delap to end up at striker, because we have actually some good players in other positions, and we have players who are like striker is a unique position because it's one of the toughest positions in football, right? To find. It's one of the rarest positions in football. I mean, even Liverpool have kind of had to figure out how do they win the league without a striker because they couldn't get one. They spent 80-something million on Nunez as a striker, and he's better as like a creative left winger than he is as a striker, and he's not that good. Not that many teams have a top striker. It's a problem. But if you're going to go spend on a striker, I think you got to get a really good one. Because it's such a risk. Like, there's just not that many. And I think it sounds crazy to say, but something like Osimhen, if there was one player I will buy, it would be him. You know what I mean? Like, if there was one player you would buy, it would be him. Much like it would have been the right call to get Harry Kane or Osimhen back then when we ended up with Højlund. Because there's just not a lot of top strikers. And if one comes on the market that is like very, very good, I think you just have to do it because it's just a dearth of them in football and they've dropped off a lot. I think if one comes on the market and is available, you just do it. That's my thoughts on it. Obviously, it's going to be difficult to assuage that, but United can make a signing like that on top of young players, and I think that they should. Otherwise, sure. Like I said, you're not going to get worse. Is Delap better than Højlund? Yes, definitely. He definitely is. Would he be our best striker right now? Yes. But does he solve the problem? Or does he... you can use the same logic, to be fair, in the other areas, signing young players and things like that. But we have decent players who can play in a few other positions. Like we have Bruno who can play as a 10. We have Ahmad who can play as a 10. We've got some center backs and things. But I feel like striker is such a key position in football. It's like if you can get a guarantee practically, then you do it there. You know what I mean? Like I think you can afford, because it's a little less clear in other positions. A striker's got to score goals. A striker's got to get it done.
So yeah, I mean, I wasn't. I'm not that personally. I'm still not that impressed with Dilap. I have a lot of doubts about him when I watch. I have a lot of doubts when I look at him. Um, 10 goals with Ipswich is no small feat. That's fine, but how? The question is how, right? I watch him go against us 10 men second half. He looks lost. To me, he looks lost. He does not look like a striker who knows how to play in a team that has a lot of the ball. He doesn't. And that's a concern. That's a concern to me. He doesn't, he's like how most of his goals are still scored on the run. Most of his goals are still scored in transitions. Most of his goals are still scored, playing in open spaces or running at the defense. There's obviously some of that with United where, wanting to run in the channels and things like that. But at the same time, you got to score goals in the box. Neither does Osimhen. What do you mean neither does Osimhen? Osimhen has scored in every league he's been at, and he's scored with the majority of his time spent in the box, in the penalty box. That's what he does. He is a complete striker. Like, yeah, it is what it is. Maybe he doesn't want to. I'm just saying. I think we should try. I think it would be a mistake not to try. I think it would be a mistake not to try. That's what I would say, because I think you cannot pass up on Osimhen, and he's not that old. I mean, he's 27, so it's not like he's done in 2 years. You should get 5 full seasons out of him, and that gives you time to rebuild and strengthen the attack. But anyway, I think that there's I think that there's a balance here. I think there's a balance here where you look at all these young players and then you go for it. Now, I was going to mention there's another factor too, and I know striker is a huge goal this summer. I can also say there is strong potential they go for 2 strikers this summer. Xerxes, I think, will be converted into a number 10, but from what I know, they're looking at 2 strikers this summer, and one will be definitely a prospect. Definitely a prospect. Like potentially someone you've never even heard of before. Okay, would be a striker, like a little older than Cheeto, but a prospect. And that probably means Højlund could potentially go on loan if he cannot be sold. Not yet, but we want one. And I'm talking to like one of them will be a cheaper, more affordable prospect one if we can do it. And there's people in mind for this, a couple specific names, but not yet. Maybe in a couple of weeks. I'll be able to. But one like but that's in addition to the main names. We're talking about Dilap or Osimhen or Samu or someone like that. I'm talking like really a prospect type of striker that would come in. Totally different category of player, but they're looking at that too. And that does indicate to me that is the good potential that Højlund will go on loan this summer, ideally. That in their ideal world for them right now, they're looking at send him on loan, move Xerxes to the 10, and then get 2 strikers in. So that's right now, I believe, what is being planned for anyway. At least that's what they want. The other thing is then that tells you, okay, you've got potentially Bruno, Xerxes, Ahmad, Garnacho, maybe Mainu for the 10s. Now, I don't think Ruben has given up. He doesn't have a choice right now, does he? He has literally 0 other forwards to play, so it'd be hard to know if Amorim has lost faith in Højlund because he literally can't pick anybody else. But let's put it this way, okay? Cheeto Obi, not Moby Martin. Cheeto Obi has been accelerated way faster than he was supposed to be and just missed the FA Youth Cup to play with the first team again. I think he's lost a bit of faith in Rasmus Højlund. No matter what he says and how nice Ruben Amorim is, he's fully promoted a 16-year-old, into the first team. So just think with that. In terms of the tens, right? We've got a lot of numbers, right? But not necessarily everybody's not necessarily convinced. But this is where United will probably look to make more. Now Ahmad could cover at right wing back. Bruno could play deep. Mainu could play deep. So, but Xerxes makes a good 10, I think. I think Xerxes makes a really, really good 10 in this system right now. I think Xerxes makes a really good 10, but they could look to young 10s as well. And obviously there's Rig, there's Nipan, there's Mastantuono, there's Joe Bellingham, there's Nene Dorgelis, and I would definitely keep those in mind. However, in addition to that, I've mentioned Guler earlier, and it's really just a minor thing at the moment, but there's definitely some potential of his availability for Madrid this year, because he's unhappy with play time and all of that. And a little bit ago, someone just told me that it might be worth looking into for United. I've looked into it, and I can't rule it out that United might be interested in it, and I have to find out. I really have to find out more. But yeah, it's one to watch, and it's one to keep an eye on because he may be leaving Madrid. His situation might be open. That Turkish journalist as well. Yeah, Xabi Alonso would love, and that's the other possibility. Of course, they change coaches, and then Xabi Alonso wants to keep him, and then it's all good, and he stays. But United may, in fact, be one of the clubs keeping an eye on him at this point in time, and keeping abreast of his situation, and he may be open to leaving. The Turkish journalist, that one, has mentioned it the other day, that his situation is definitely kind of open right now, and some teams in the Premier League are looking at him, and I do believe we're one of them. But it's like, God knows what's going to happen with that yet. But he would very much fit the idea, right? A young player, very talented, good potential, would fit like a glove into one of those 10 positions. So silky, good on the ball, all of that. So I'm just keeping an eye on that under the radar chance that maybe something could be done there. And United wouldn't be the only one, obviously, if he ends up leaving Madrid. There's going to be a lot of clubs looking at him. So, that's fine. So, but it's an interesting one. So yes, just we'll keep rounding this out, but I'm definitely more perking my ears up on young players that we're hearing about nowadays, than the big names, because it certainly is a change in strategy, to potentially get more guys like, more younger players and things like that in. And so if there's even like a whisper or a hint of it, I'm a little more attentive to it now. Speaking of young players, what do y'all think about the Garnacho thing? Because I think that my ears like super itchy. Yeah, I think it will be to a degree taken out of context, because like I said, there's like literally like a whisper about it of keeping an eye on it, which is probably not even that big of news, but it's one that is worth, I think, just watching over the next few months. But it is what it is. Whatever gets said, gets said. But yeah, what do you think of this Garnacho situation? Because like I think it's more of a deal than it's being led on, because as I kind of shared before the January window, Amorim was not super happy with him, and at one point, no, I don't think it is a thing. That's the funny part. I think it very much is a thing, because it's not something on its own. This was like the first setback. Amorim was very much open to selling Garnacho. He pretty much admitted it, that he was interested in selling him. And then he said he kind of turned a corner and had better application. This is the first setback. And Garnacho acts out immediately. The first setback. That's a bad sign. Look, it's very easy to act good. It's very easy to like anybody will know this if you have it's easy for somebody to like be good and behave when they're starting every week, when you've shipped off their main competition to Aston Villa. It's very easy. The test is during trying times, like when you sub them at 40 minutes into the game, and he thinks he should stay on, to immediately have that reaction. Yeah, it's easy to be good when times are easy, but when something happens that goes against what you think, when you disagree with the manager, then that's when it shows character or not. And I think that was really poor. I think it's a really bad sign that not much has changed about his attitude. It's just that when it's easy to get along, and when it's not, it's not. And that does worry me. That worries me quite a bit. The other thing that I think was a little bit telling, a little bit of maybe caught in a little bit of a lie here, Amorim, is he says Garnacho has a knock. But that's not what he said in the beginning. Why he said, he definitely didn't say that was why he subbed him, but the story changed a little bit afterwards. And I suspect that potentially I'm not saying this for sure, but I'd be curious to see if Garnacho doesn't play tomorrow or doesn't start tomorrow, that he might be slightly being punished for this. Because it was a little bit of like suddenly he has a knock, but that's not what he said in the post-match about why he subbed him or anything like that. So, I think there's a little more to it. I understand that, but I think there's a little bit more to it than that. So it is what it is, though. It is what it is. I'm not saying he should be like further punished or whatever, but it is a pattern of behavior that seems to not end. It's a pattern of behavior that seems to not end. That goes on. And it's gone through two managers now that it keeps kind of happening. I mean, look, I want to ask you a question. Seriously, I do. I want to ask. If has there ever been a 20-year-old at United who's had 5 disciplinary incidents by this age? Do you know of any? Because that is what bothers me. It's really unusual. I mean, Rashford had disciplinary issues after years and years and years and years of being known as one of the best, most players who applied himself the best, all of that, blah, 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 right? And then there were some issues in the last couple of years. I don't know of any young player, right? Vivell Morrison, right? Yeah. It's not a good sign. It's not usual. Like, I know people say a player's young, blah, 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 but that's the opposite. It's fucking unusual for a player to have this many incidents. It's just unusual for a player to have this many incidents. And the ones that do, it hasn't ended happily for them in their careers and at United. It is unusual for a young player to have that many incidents, to have 2, 3, 4 of them in a single season. It just is unusual, and that is a concern. You know what I mean? It is what it is. But maybe there's more. I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm talking about being dropped. You now have 2 public incidents already just this season. I know that Scholes is doing shit like that. I'm not talking about people not doing things, but that wasn't necessarily against the rules back then. for what it's worth. I'm talking about disciplinary issues, like public incidents where people are violating rules, and things like that. And there's not that many. It's not like it isn't common. That's the thing. Who else has done it? Can you like in the entire Premier League right now? Can you think of one other player that has multiple incidents off the pitch where they've ended up dropped by the manager or doing something like that? I just in the entire Premier League right now, who else has had two this season? And I'd like to know of any. You know, like Pogba's agent. Yeah, Pogba's agent may be the closest, but Pogba always showed up. You know, for training and shit like that. um, maybe Sir Alex had a lid on it. I don't know. Yeah, Greenwood did, and a lot of those were covered up. And I don't want to make, obviously the comparison because they're totally different things. But it bothers me because it just like I'm not. It just like when things keep happening. Like I look at things through the microscope of not through the microscope, but through the veil of what has happened. What is the reality right now? And when I look at it, I was praising Garnacho not 1 week ago for turning it around, improving all of that. To have another setback makes me very disappointed. It just does. It does. And I'm not somebody who's hating for hating's sake here. I had plenty of reason to, I've praise when praise is due, and I've gave a lot of praise for that. But I think the worst thing that we can have right now under Amorim is this kind of shit. I think it's the worst thing that we can have is things like that, petulance and all that. We need more than ever to erase that. When people talk about culture, people talk about the locker room, and people talk about all these things, fine. You can't have that going on. You just can't. You just can't have these types of incidents anymore. Nobody should get away with them anymore. So anyway, anyway, that's my thoughts on it. It's just a yeah, it's just interesting. It's just a concern. I do have concerns on it, and I think they're valid. To be fair, I do think they're valid. It's just unusual because I can't think of any other player in the Premier League this season that has these incidents happening to them. I mean, there was somebody at Chelsea who was dropped for a game, I feel like, but that's about it. Like anyway, I don't know how to go about it. Like it is unusual for young players to have multiple incidents. These things aren't that normal these days. Like, I mean, Sancho got sold for doing something on social media and frozen out for 2 years. Yeah, I think that it's unusual. So anyway, it is a cultural problem, but you got to move. There's fights, but fights are not always a bad thing. Fights are different though. Like fights are fights. Like there is a difference. I'm saying there's a difference. There's plenty of incidents and things that go on where there's been fights at United. The players aren't punished for them because there's a difference between passionate action and stuff like that. I'm talking about players genuinely getting dropped for disciplinary reasons on multiple occasions. It is unusual. It is quite unusual. And I don't think you can actually overlook it. Like it does take a lot to get dropped. And it's like at a high professional level, Rashford got frozen out and sold, or moved on at least, it's like there tend to be serious incidents. There's nobody in the team today left who has been dropped for disciplinary reasons at United. Not one. If you think about it, there's none. There's not a single other player left who's ever been dropped for disciplinary reasons except Garnacho. That is a concern when things keep happening, even if they're little, even if they're whatever. It's about a pattern of behavior. Anyway, That's fine. Let's see. Let's move on to Fulham. Let's just see what happens with it. It concerns me, but it's not like the be all end all of everything. It's just a concerning thing to me. Um, let's move on and talk about Fulham here because obviously this is a big game. He was dropped for the City game. There's other things that have happened I think I mean these were reported, to be fair. Andy Mitten talked about how in Ten Hag's first season he was constantly late and he was getting dropped from games and not even getting, it took him longer to get chances because he couldn't show up on time, for what it's worth. The journalist from Turkey's reported United will trigger, and I hear that, but I've definitely had it played down a little bit to me as well, but you never know. There's some gamesmanship here. I think it is more about, as I said in the video as well, it is more about where we end up at the end of the season in terms of our ability to convince him to join, all of that. So we'll see. Let's move on to Fulham. Wrong thing. Okay. Do we have options? Like, what are our choices here? I'm gonna just put like what do we have any? Do we have options at any of these positions? You think Cheetah will start tomorrow? Well, that's what I want to check. Let me fill in a couple of positions because I think we don't have a choice in like 3 or 4 positions. Onana's our only keeper, and we need a Onana, man. Oh man. Dorgu suspended. Put the goalkeeping coach in goal. Put Johnny Evans in goal. Said that before. We don't have fit players, so I think the back 6 kind of Madueke. Yes, I thought there was somebody at Chelsea, a disagreement with the coach. I think this picks itself because we actually don't have any other players. Shaw back where? Yeah, because Dorgu is suspended. He'll be able to play in the Europa League. Let's be real, Harrison's not going to play. We don't have the players. I mean, who do we have for the 5 players? We have Ugarte, Bruno, Højlund, Xerxes, Garnacho, Casemiro, and Eriksen. We have 7. We don't have a lot of choice here in the matter, do we? Kone, I don't think so. He played with the under-21s. I guess he could be in the squad, but it's... Oh, and Cheeto. Excuse me. Of course, we have Cheeto. All right, well, let's just give it a vote. Let's just give it a vote. Let's go up top. Who do you want? Who is it, guys? Are we going to vote for Cheeto into the team for the first time? Or are we going to put Xerxes or Højlund at striker? Now, Xerxes could be at 10, mind you. So you don't want... Just because if he doesn't win this vote, he can still play in the 10. Who should start at striker? Is Cheeto going to win this vote? Xerxes, Eriksen, Højlund. With Bruno and Ugarte deep, is probably our best team. I mean, Fulham away at home, we're probably going to have a lot of the ball, I would assume. Might need some help unlocking that defense. I'm not opposed to that, for what it's worth, but should we priority Europa or FA Cup? I think everybody will say Europa, Naveen, though, because it gets us into Champions League. Play Garnacho left wing back. You know, DB, I was thinking about that, and like when he subbed him and put Dallo there, it proved once and for all he won't play. He doesn't think he has the work rate for left wing back. I don't think fans will jump on Cheeto. I don't think Cheeto's going to start, mind you, but I don't think fans will jump on. I can't get him in here, can I? I'm not going to be able to get him. That's fine. I'll figure it out in a minute. Yeah, I don't think Cheeto's going to start anyway, but he did win the poll, so we'll leave it at that. Let's go 10s. Do you want Xerxes, Eriksson, Xerxes, Bruno Eriksson? I guess those are our three. Oh, no, there's more. Xerxes, Garnacho. No, you know what? I'm just going to have to do it 10. Left. Let's go right 10. We're just going to have to do it one at a time because it's a little too confusing. Xerxes, Garnacho, Bruno. For right 10. What do we got? Cheeto up top, Xerxes the link man, Garnacho out wide, and Bruno. I mean, it's probably the best team, but okay. Xerxes gonna win this one. All right, so Xerxes there. What do we do here? Left 10. What is the choice here? Guess I could throw Hoyland in there just in case. Garnacho's better on the right. I think so too. I just don't know why he never plays over there. Garnacho or Eriksson? I think Garnacho's probably gonna win it still. Garnacho, Xerxes, Cheeto. Not a lot of goals there, but hey, what are you gonna do? I wouldn't be opposed. I'll tell you what. No, we did that. It didn't work. I've said that before. Casemiro's just too fucking chaotic. I said that before. I've been fooled. Never mind. I'm gonna say what I was gonna say. Collier apparently is not ready yet. Still, I thought he'd be back by now, but apparently not. Sooner we have a left footer on left and right foot on the right. And cross for Hoyland. Yeah. All right, so we throw Garnacho in here. We'll see. All right, and then in the midfield, it's gonna be Bruno Ugarte, right? Or well, no, I mean it has to be. Like there's not even another choice here. Nobody's gonna vote for Casemiro to start. And then you're saying this is what people would like to see is Cheeto up top. I mean, I think that this is all pretty much solid. I think we could see Eriksson, Xerxes, and Hoyland or something like that. So really the front three is the guess here, because like you have Xerxes and Eriksson. You have Eriksson and you have Cheeto. Like you have 5 players for 3 positions up front. Eriksson, Xerxes, Hoyland, Garnacho, and Cheeto. You have 5 players for those 3 positions. So technically you could vary it a little bit up front, but you know, I understand it. I have a feeling it'll be Hoyland, Xerxes, and Eriksson, but that's just me. Just me thinking. You never know. You never know what's going to happen next. Maybe it'll be pretty crazy. But yeah, Cool. Fair enough. I can't add Cheeto in, but we'll just leave it at that. Ericsson and Xerxes is slow. It is, but I do feel like we'll have possession. I do think we'll have possession. The game against Fulham, we could have used that. So, is there no chance? No, there is definitely a chance Garnacho is benched. Like I said, I suspect personally the knock thing is a little bit gamesmanship, but it is what it is. A little bit of punishment, just under the radar. All right, I'm gonna leave it there. I'll be back in the morning for the game to do a watch along. Thanks for hanging out today. Yeah, let's see what happens tomorrow. See if we hear anything early, if we get a surprise Cheeto start or something crazy like that. I guess we'll see if we're due for any surprises. But thanks for hanging out today. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and I will see you all for a watch along tomorrow. Okay? Enjoy your day. Have a good one.